In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to do discourse tracing in a handwritten way. If you don't have access to the BibleArc app online. So I'm actually using my iPad and I'm marking it up there, but this is something that you could print off and do it by hand. You could then take a picture of it or scan it. Then you could submit that as an assignment online. I'm going to do discourse tracing on 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18. As you can see, I've already broken out the clauses here and arranged them in a table. And then on the left, I have a handy little chart that shows us the relationships that we will be using. So if you've seen this before, you know what we're doing. If not, then you'll pick this up as we go. But I'm going to go ahead and begin. We have here in the first clause, Paul writing, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep." And he's writing about believers who have died, and he's writing a word of explanation and comfort to those who are remaining. And what we have here is an action and a result. They are uninformed, or that they're hypothetically uninformed. The result is that if they remain uninformed, they will grieve. Okay, but before we draw this connection, it's important to notice another connection. So the grieving is yet another action. And how are they going to grieve if they're uninformed? They're going to grieve like unbelievers. They're going to grieve like those without any hope. So what you have here is an action manner. Now we're going to go ahead and connect our action purpose, or pardon me, action result. So the grieving is connected to their being uninformed, and the result, if they remain uninformed, is that they will grieve like those that don't have any hope. Now let's go on down to the next verses. And Paul says, "If we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus." Now it would be tempting to see this as a conditional, an if-then, because we have the word if here. But when you look at this logically, it's not a conditional. It's not that if you believe God will bring them. It's certain that God's going to bring them. So I think we should best see this as an inference. So basically, if Jesus died and rose again, then we infer from that that he will come again and raise those who have fallen asleep. And then Paul says, "For this we say to you by a word of the Lord." Now notice what's happening here. So Paul has given us this idea that God's going to bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. Now he's explaining that. "For we say this to you," and notice he gives more information about God raising those. So this is an idea explanation. Okay, now I'm not going to draw the connection just yet because we've got other things to draw, but this is an idea explanation. Now let's go on down. And what you have here is yet another idea explanation. What makes this passage unique is you have these kind of nested idea explanation passages, because Paul has explained this with this statement, but then he explains this statement with this statement. So it's kind of a building, kind of a nesting series of explanations. And what you have here is a series of things that are going to characterize Jesus' return. So he's going to descend with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, with the trumpet of God. So that's a series of three things. Now what's going to happen when Jesus does these things? Well, that's an action that he's going to take, and there's going to be an observable result. So Jesus is going to descend with a shout, with a trumpet, with the voice of an archangel, and the result of that is going to be that the dead are raised. You can also maybe see that as a purpose, but there's not the grammatical phrasing there to maybe construe this as a purpose. We see it as a result. Okay? And then we see after that those who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds. Okay? And this again is another action, but I think we could construe this as an action purpose, because that is the purpose of being caught up, to meet. That's why this is happening. So that's different than an action result. There's actually a connection here that kind of connects it purposefully. Now, let's draw another connection. These two things form a progression. Okay? So we're going to have the Lord descend and raise the dead, but then, progressing from that, we are going to be caught up with them. Okay? So that's a progression, builds towards a climax. Now let's connect our idea explanation. So notice here the idea that we will not precede those who have fallen asleep. That idea is explained further in what he says here. Do you see that? All the details in the second part explain the fact that we will not precede them. So this is an idea explanation. And that in itself is an explanation of this previous statement. Okay? So that those who are asleep will be brought, that God will bring with him. He explains that by this statement, and he explains this statement by this statement. So you see it's kind of a nested. Paul gives the statement, he explains it, and then he explains the explanation. So it's a series of idea explanations. Now, how is all this related up here? Well, this original statement, Paul does not want them to grieve like those who have no hope. This entire dialogue that expounds on the return of Christ and the resurrection of the saints is a ground. It's a ground for this statement here. The admonition to not grieve or not be uninformed is grounded in the truth that is explained here, that Jesus will return, raise the dead, and catch us up. And then there's one final relationship to notice. Okay? So because of all of this, because Jesus is coming again, and therefore we shouldn't grieve as unbelievers, this is a comforting truth, then the believers should comfort one another with these words. And that's an inference from this entire section. So because Paul doesn't want them to be ignorant, he wants them to know about Jesus' return, be comforted by that. Well, they should comfort one another with this truth.